All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Barry Peterson is recovering from his knee surgery, and he asked me to fill in today. So, calling the meeting to order, can we get a roll call?
Okay, I don't have my book, so bear with me. Mr. Peterson?
Barry?
Mr. Egan?
Here.
John? Mr. Gentili?
Here.
Lasky?
Here.
Ms. Kaminsky? Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
All right, the agenda got sent out last week. Any additions or deletions from the agenda? Motion to approve the agenda. All in favor of that? Aye. Public comments? I don't think there's anybody waiting in the wings out there. I didn't see anybody out there. So I think we can move on to the approval of the minutes for this meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
I guess I can second that.
Second them, but I wasn't here for it, but I'll second it.
I'll second. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. On to the treasurer's report.
Susan, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
Just so everyone knows that for some reason, I cannot share my screen, and I think the only way for me to resolve that would be to start everything over and restart my laptop, which I'm not going to do. So you're not going to see things up there, but you should all have it in your handout. So go ahead, Susan. Sorry for that interruption.
That's okay. Did anybody have any questions on the accounts payable? It's pretty straightforward this month.
Doesn't sound like there are any questions.
So we usually do the accounts payable first, and then we'll do the next section.
Okay.
A vote to approve that.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve report?
Make that motion.
Second?
And we have to have a roll call for that, I believe, don't we?
Should.
Okay.
Egan?
Yes.
Mr. Don? Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky?
Yep.
Kaminsky? Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Okay. And then the revenue and expenditures and the trial balance are next. And then I did include the Pfos grant for that we're expecting the $145,000 reimbursement. So just remember when you're looking at that bottom line, that $165,000 at the bottom that shows a loss, $145,000 of that will be reimbursed back to us from that Pfos grant. I'm not sure on the timeline of that, but if we don't have it by the end of this month, then I'll just accrue that as a receivable on the books. Did anybody have any questions on any of the items?
Just an update, Susan, is last week was State Airports Conference, and MDOT said that their goal is to have all those reimbursements for the Pfos approved by the end of this month. So I'm hoping that means we should have that check hopefully before the end of the month, so that keeps it cleaner. And also the CRISA grant, they also updated us on that, and those reimbursements also should be processed in that time frame. So that, I forget what that amount is, like 12,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So we should have both of those, and if not, we should accrue those.
Yep.
So.
Okay. So I would need an action on that, and then we'll discuss the amendment to the budget that I'd like you guys to approve and how to do that. So.
A motion would be in order to approve the remainder of the financial reports.
Right.
Make a motion to approve the financial reports for the month of August.
We have a second on that?
Roll call?
Yes.
Mr. Dance, Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Ms. Lasky,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky, Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson, Mr. Egan.
Yes.
So the next item that I'd like the board to take action on is if you go down probably 3 pages in your information. It's it's for the amended budget for 21-22, so it's actually for this fiscal year. It's for that Pfos grant. We need to add $142,000 in the revenues and $142,000 in the miscellaneous state reimbursement line, as you can see that for the Pfos. So then your new amended budget would be $657,679. So since we didn't budget for that, that's something that came after we did the original budget. We need to do a budget amendment to add these 2 items, so we're not out of balance when we get audited. So I would just need the board to approve amending the budget, adding that $142,000, and then your final budget number would be that $657,679.
Okay, we have a motion to approve,
Actually,
and if we
I had
could second, then we can discuss it.
Well, I might want to change the motion for
Ah,
that.
okay.
I was trying
Oh,
to
okay.
sneak it in.
Okay.
Susan, noticing that the repairs and maintenance item is
Mhm.
way over budget by like double.
So I'm
is
going,
that-
that's totally different. So we can move those line items after all of the September bills are paid. So that way we know for sure where we're at. This is adding to the budget. So the other one would
Okay.
be considered a budget amendment to what we already have. And we can move
Okay.
those line items whatever way we want. But this, we're adding money into the budget and changing the dollar amount that was already approved and budgeted from the board.
Okay, so that was my first question. And then my second question is, given that Prina Newhoff is working on this airport layout plan update project,
Mhm.
that is a granted project, even
Right.
though we don't see all the money for that because the state handles that, does that
Right.
get reported in our financials as it gets audited? And then do we need to do something similar for that grant as
Right,
well?
last fiscal year was the first year that they did that. So, next month, if you know a dollar amount, we could add that and have that added like we did for this Pfos grant.
Okay.
Mhm.
I will
I just
get
have,
that.
we just have to have some information to back that up. So if you could get some proof of what that amount would be, then we could do an amendment for that.
Okay. Would you want the total grant amount?
I would just
Even
need the
though
amount,
not-
right, I would just need the amount that's gonna be included for the 21-22 fiscal year.
Okay. I can work on getting that for you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
don't need to change the.
All right.
Just wanted to make sure that you
Sure.
didn't have to do it again. But
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Do I, we still need a second on that? This is the motion to amend the budget.
Susan, can I just ask a clarifying question? So when you say
Yes.
this is an addition, but the overage for repairs and maintenance is not an addition, you're just going to be moving money from another
Yes.
account?
Yes, so let's say if, I don't know, like your advertising, for example, is under budget. We would take the money that's under budget in that line item and move it to repairs and maintenance. Because you can't just add an expense. Where's that extra revenue gonna come from? So even though our repairs and maintenance line item is over budget, at the end of the fiscal year, I'll take that dollar amount, adjust those line items for your expenses to try to match them up to what true was formed. But unless you're expecting more revenue to come in, I can't just say, well, we're gonna add $25,000 in repairs and maintenance. Where's the $25,000 gonna come from? because it has to be a balanced budget. That's why we're adding 142,000 in revenues and 142,000 in expenses for the PFAS grant. And then at the end of the fiscal year, if we're still under, then that money comes from the fund budget that gets carried forward every fiscal year to bring it into balance. Does
I'll
that
second
answer?
the motion.
Any other questions or discussions before we vote on this?
Did that answer your question?
I believe it did, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote on that.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky? Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Okay, now do we need another, motion to move that repair budget?
No.
Next
no,
month.
Not until next month? Okay,
Right.
good, okay. Great. All right, so we now need to approve the entire, financial statement.
We already did that.
We already did that. Okay. I believe we can move on then. Committee reports. Did the executive committee do anything? I'm not aware of any committee meetings that happened.
Well, the
We had that one,
ad hoc
the ad hoc committee, I figured we could get to
hangar
that.
committee,
Mm-hmm.
so, but no other committees met.
Okay. I guess I can report on that, or you can report on that meeting that we had last week. We met for about an hour with, Joe Sprague over the, repair facility that they want to set up over here. And, we really are down to the final negotiation, I guess, as to the dollar amount that will change hands to make this happen. But I remain excited about this prospect. I think it's good for the, airport. I think it's really good for the airport, and terrific for our relationship with Cape Air.
And so with Cape Air, that process of Cadillac Air Service doing enhanced maintenance for Cape Air has started. They're still ramping up, but on any given day, we could have 5 or 6 of their employees here working on aircraft. Right now, we've got 5 technims here
Yeah.
being worked on, 3 over at the hangar and 2 out on the ramp.
Yeah, it's busy over there
So
already.
it's providing a lot of activity for the airport, and just having that happen here is good.
Right.
So,
And we had another meeting scheduled for right after this meeting, but, Joe couldn't make it to this meeting this afternoon, so we're rescheduling that, and I've already sent you the 2 days I cannot go, so. All right, on to the, I don't think, since we had any reports, there's really nothing to approve. Your reports?
Thank you.
okay.
Bird strike, wow.
So yeah, this is something I found out this morning. So over the weekend, as the airline was coming in, they believed they struck a bird. There was a shudder felt in the aircraft and by the passengers and the crew. And out of an abundance of caution, they radioed in one of the fire truck, basically out and on the runway, just in case it was something significant they didn't know about. But once they landed, they couldn't detect any damage. So
Wow.
one of the hazards of aviation is airfoul.
Had some close calls, I never had hit one.
So, then this is an item that goes back now 2 years, with the passing of our former head maintenance person, Jeff Wright. I mentioned this to the board about a year ago, basically got the board's approval to basically dedicate our maintenance facility in his memory. We have the plaque ready, and we have that planned for tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If you'd like to attend, his wife will be here for that. But we're scheduling it kind of at the same time as our regular staff meeting. Not a big deal, but if anyone wanted to, welcome to do that tomorrow. Moving then on to the passenger data and performance of the airline data. Last month, I didn't have July numbers. Those are now included, as well as August. And you'll see that July was down from a year ago, and that pretty much directly correlates to the number of canceled flights we had in July, and I'll touch more in detail on that later. August, though, really, was the opposite of that. August was up a good percentage from last year. In fact, it's kind of July and August of last year are kind of swapped this year as far as total passengers goes. But that, again, is attributable to the minimal number of canceled flights that we had in August, and hopefully that can be maintained going forward. So we're doing good right now on enplanements. And then on the bottom half, you'll see those raw numbers. Something wrong.
You
I've got it.
duplicated July into August, it looks like.
And then I put September and October. So, so yeah, that one of those 23.10% rows needs to be eliminated, and the other one shifted up. But you'll see that in June, we had 46% flights canceled, July, half that at 23%, and August, down 5%, which is historically, a reasonable number, still a little bit higher than it should be or needs to be, but in some ways that's comparing to an airline that only operated once a day. So when you're now operating 4 times a day, there's a little bit more give in having a cancellation here or there, because there are other flights that same day generally to accommodate those passengers, or they get accommodated out of other airports. So overall, much improved from where we were at the beginning of summer. Going on to the next page, on the Airfares Reports. Not a lot has changed here. Not a lot of movement. Manistee and Grand Rapids are slightly lower on average this month. Traverse City slightly higher. Muskegon is a little bit an outlier, and I guess I'll actually go into that now. So you may recall me talking earlier in the year about SkyWest pulling out of lots of markets. One of those was Muskegon. And through the replacement EAS bidding process, Muskegon received a bid from an air carrier called Southern Airways. Southern operates 9-seat aircraft much like us. So Muskegon, in the time frame of this, is projected to have switched over from regional jet service on SkyWest to 9-seat service on Southern. As part of that, they're losing the United code share that comes with a SkyWest regional flight, and much like us, it's a interline. So now they get to Chicago and they can either interline a connecting flight on either American or United. But the pricing of that is less dictated by either United or American, because it's the sum of the two fares. So in general, that has, I would say, hurt Muskegon. Their fares have gone up the highest of the different airports that I'm, surveying in our region. Pretty much now, they've been SkyWest and United service for probably about 10 years. And you'll see here that pretty much the majority of the lowest fares are now on American. So that will be an adjustment for that community to change allegiances with carriers, because, United is not right now pricing out at the lowest fare. Part of the reason, from my understanding, is they wanted to go this direction, as opposed to some other airports have been pushing back and kind of delaying, trying to keep SkyWest in, is they were always unhappy with the schedule SkyWest gave them. They really feel for their business community, they needed an early morning departure, late evening arrival with an overnighting aircraft, which often SkyWest wouldn't accommodate them with, so they had just midday turns. So the business community drove kind of this selection in these smaller aircraft. So we'll see if it actually accomplishes the goals that they were hoping to accomplish. I find it interesting, though, that given the similarity, 9-seat service here, Cape Air, 9-seat service there with Southern, the disparity in the pricing that is going on. Part of that is due to the fact that we do have the American code share, so that can lower prices when American is setting the price for the full trip versus just the interline fare. But the other part of it is that their pricing just one way or round trip to Chicago from Muskegon is higher than Cape Air's pricing from here to Chicago, at least in this snapshot. Their low is $157, ours is $118, so that $40 difference tacked then on to basically every fare. So it'll be interesting, now that we're kind of more similar, is to see how that develops over time. On the bottom half, you include some parking fees in there that equalizes us in Grand Rapids out to a great degree. And in fact, if Grand Rapids didn't have Frontier service, that brought their average down this month, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 20 cities, Frontier was the low fare carrier, and generally by a significant margin, given how Frontier operates. So, for legacy carriers like American United, we're closer to Grand Rapids than, that initial average would actually show. Any questions on, I guess, either of these last two pages of numbers and information? If not, then I will move on to the next page. So I know that Jeff isn't with us today because he's at MAC conference. Last week I was at the airport managers conference, and was at a nice place. It was at Mackinac Island.
Nice.
Which is this, they try to do that about once every 10 years, so it's nice to be up there in the fall. There were 3 topics that I thought worthwhile to mention to the board about what's going on. None of these are going to be surprising, but there may be some aspects as to how they relate to us, or how they might relate to us, that you should be aware of. The first is Pfos. Continues to be an issue, but 2 new updates, or really 1 update, and then what then is really kind of the idea behind that is The FAA is expected to approve, by January or in January of this coming year, so, a few months from now, a new certified product for use by airport firefighting. Replace, the product that we're currently using that is source of many, many issues. The challenges then come to what happens then. So at this point, there's no timeline established as to when that product will be available. Imagine now suddenly every airport and a lot of other firefighting organizations will want that product ASAP, given what we all know about supply chain and production schedules. That's unlikely to happen. So is that 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it a 5-year rollout of the new product? So how long is that transition? Completely unknown. Second, which I found very interesting, and this session was led by the fire chief of the Grand Rapids Airport, and he's actually head of the National Airport Firefighters Association, so he's intimately involved in these issues at the national level. And he was saying that one of the consequences, and it's a big unknown, is the new product is not as effective as the old products. So does that mean the FAA is then going to need to follow through and say airports need to carry larger quantities of a less effective product to equal the effectiveness of the old product? Do we need a new fire truck as a result of this changeover? And if that were the case, how is that funded? What is the timeline for that? It potentially changes training and how you apply it because it's less effective. Don't necessarily use the same means of applying the product. So there are more questions in some ways, new products, than there are, answers. But one that concerns me is, not that acquiring a new fire truck isn't a concern, especially on funding it, but at least I believe in a situation like that, there eventually would be funding for something like that. But one of the things that concerned me was the discussion of, so as you transition from the old to the new, you basically have to decontaminate your existing facility. Trucks, all the plumbing. We fortunately just have a couple barrels, so, we don't have tanks that, it's stored in that would have to be purged and decontaminated. But the going rate right now is that decontaminating a truck is a $25,000 expense. I'm less sure that there will be funding for something like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of unknowns on this front as we go down this path.
So if you try to trade in the truck, you can trade in the truck, you still have to decontaminate it first?
Probably. That's some of the things that came out of that session that I thought were informative, concerning things to keep track of. Another big topic of conversation was supply chain issues overall, and in general, the guidance now is anything you're doing, plan 12 to 24 months lead time for anything. Especially, if it's specialized for airports, but even non-specialized things. And it runs the gamut from de-icing fluid to cleaning supplies to construction materials to... Yes.
My question was going to be, because I think you mentioned it at the last meeting I was not at, that you have the runway markings scheduled to be done.
That
Has
I,
your vendor confirmed he can get the paint?
Yes.
Because we couldn't even get enough paint to mark the
I-
concrete.
have not heard that as an issue, so yes, I'm confident
We went to 3 different vendors to redo, because we put in all new concrete in the porte cochere,
Mhm.
and they could not get enough paint to do all the paint markings we needed.
Yeah, no, so, as we, move forward the next year or two with projects, whether it be smaller things that we're trying to do ourselves as it relates to the hangars, or, the bigger projects as it relates to, runways and taxiways, there's a good likelihood that there will be supply constraint issues that will delay certain timeframes on that.
So how would that work? So if we were, I'm trying to put it in more real terms. So before this, we may have said, like, we authorize whatever, you to go start this project. And, now we may have to start to think about authorizing that sooner, but then what's the AP impact? So is it typically like you'd order something, but we don't get the invoice until services are rendered? I'm trying to think, like, the approval is one thing, and the timeline, thinking ahead, but then where do the dollars go?
It's gonna depend on how the funding source lines up with the project. So for a lot of things, it's not gonna matter, because we've already got funds for it. Where it might matter is if it's the type of project where we're obligated to basically expend the funds locally, and then only at completion can we get reimbursement through the grant. Like, we're waiting for the Pfos testing grant, is that type of a grant. Then the longer it takes, the longer it will take for us to get reimbursement until, that, whatever that last long-term lead time item gets accomplished, that will hold up that full reimbursement or potentially hold it up. So it's things like that that are potentially an issue. Where it's concerning from a planning standpoint is costing out any future project becomes much more difficult, because the people are gonna be reluctant to bid at all if they, B, they'll probably bid high just in case, so that they're covering their risk on it. And then you just potentially have timing issues where the FAA likes things to happen in a certain time frame for things, and when that doesn't fit in that time frame, then what happens? So all sorts of issues. And again, this spans the board. I mean, a lot of airports, and this doesn't impact us because our security requirements aren't the same as a Grand Rapids or Traverse City, but, your ID badge cards, huge supply shortage on that. So airports are now ordering 2 years in advance for their expected needs on that, which then exacerbates the problem because everyone's ordering more than they really need, but, those that are successful early on that are then protected, whereas those that are late to the game on that are then scrambling to find out how they're gonna meet their security requirements when they're out of stock on badges. Another big thing was just procurement of vehicles. And then, a segue in a couple of these conversations is the belief that overall quality of products is declining as a result of all of this. That, you're getting inferior products that are being rushed to market to fill a need. And so, again, this isn't unique to aviation. It's just interesting hearing it as it applies by my peers, so that everyone else is seeing, warning us. And, so for example, I generally don't order the icing fluid for the winter until the 1st of October, the beginning of the new fiscal year. I'm gonna order it this week. I know I'm not gonna receive it and won't get billed until next year, but that extra 3 weeks may be the difference between me running out in January. I mean, I've got carryover, so it's not like I
No, that's a good
need it,
example, though. Mhm.
but, you know, like, didn't even occur to me that I might need to order that sooner this year, and that maybe I should have ordered it 6 months ago, so. And then the last is just employment, skilled worker shortage. You know, we hear it in the news about pilots. A little bit behind that in the news is aviation mechanics, but it's every aspect, consulting firms, construction, anything related to airports is having, you know, and again, it's not unique to aviation, but it is impacting aviation potentially more so than it is other industries, partly because there's so much funding available right now to do stuff through various grant programs that have been released. So the demand on the resources is higher than it has been, and yet now the quantity is constrained. So, moving on then. So last month I mentioned shared with the board our annual airport inspection results. There were 4 issues identified. 3 of the issues have been closed out. The last is the pavement marking, and I had conversation with our state project manager on that, and she aware, even though I had sent her the information, that we had a deadline for this to get done, but she assured me that that should not be an issue, that she may have to move some scheduling around to accommodate the end of October date for this. But it looked like it was on schedule, and the contractor is working throughout the state on their other airports that they're doing pavement markings on. So I think we're good on that. My only concern on that in talking to her is that we're getting crack sealing and pavement marking done. They're 2 different contractors, and I was hoping they would be the same contractor doing both pieces of work. But because they're different contractors, just making sure that it's highly desirable to crack seal before you paint, as opposed to paint first and then have black lines all over it, obscuring it. But we'll deal with that as necessary.
We're gonna be able to work the schedules around that, flight schedules around them working out there?
We've not had an issue in the past.
Okay. All right.
Generally, their equipment is mobile, so you move on and off fairly easily.
All right.
You have a lot of red paint?
No, very minimal.
Good.
Mostly
That
yellow.
was the biggest one that had a quota on it.
Okay.
So all of our curbing for the fire lanes and all that was the hardest
That was
thing
the
there.
hardest to get.
Barry, can I go back?
Sure.
So your fall airport conference, was that, you have September 20th, 23rd?
Yes. Oh. Sorry, I looked at the calendar the wrong week. So
That's
that was-
okay, so it was last week?
Subtract a week from that,
Okay.
whatever the dates are.
Okay, no worries. And then you mentioned for the product, the new product to be certified, is it just one specific product, or is it?
No, actually, that is, so they're actually, right now, it looks like they will certify 3 different products,
Okay,
but they're incompatible with each other. So once you acquire one product, you have to stick with that. It's not like you can choose one and then there's a supply issue in that, choose another one, because they can't be mixed. So you would have to do a cleaning and decontamination of the vehicle to swap products, which makes it not practical. So you're kind of betting your future on a specific product, which is, sounds about right.
Do they give you the names of the products and stuff, so, or do, like, guidance on, like, I'd be curious, is one product is made and supplied by 3 different manufacturers, and here's where they exist in the world, or?
At some point,
No.
I would expect to get that information. At this point, no, I don't have that. And we being small, we're kind of at the low end of the food chain, I would say. I tend to wait for the bigger airports to make their informed decisions first, and then copy what they do, because they've got more resources to look at and think through these types of issues. It was a topic that came up as a concern of the nature of the new products. Did that answer your questions, Kristen?
Yes, thank you, yep.
Then on just capital projects, so last month I handed out the draft of the ALP. I haven't heard any feedback from anybody, so again, I'd encourage people to look through that and provide any feedback, or even just if you wanted to sit down with me, have me explain things to you that are in there, I'd be more than happy to do that. The state, it's in their queue for review. I haven't heard anything, and given where we are in the year, I'm not really expecting much because they're focused on year-end, closing out projects, getting things done so that they can then start up new things for the new fiscal year starting October 1st. Pfos testing grant, we already basically know where that is. And again, the update I got is that should be processed by the end of September. There is a new opportunity for an additional amount of funding to continue testing. So we did submit a grant application for an additional about $200,000, roughly the amount of this past grant, to now move on to soil testing and to continue monitoring wells that were installed as part of the first grant. And I had a conversation with our consultant on this and basically said, so you go back in history on this, so the first round of grant opportunities was, I think we got $25,000 to procure a piece of testing equipment so that we no longer need to dispense the product when we do our required annual testing on the fire trucks. That first level. Then the second round was the previous testing grant, which was $200,000. Now a third round of $200,000. So not right now our money, but you know, we've got $400,000, or will have $400,000 into testing. What's coming is cleanup a next step, and if testing is costing $400,000, what is cleanup going to cost? And will there be funding for that as these things get more and more, progressively more and more expensive? And right now there is no answer to any of this. And part of the reason I ask is, once we do all of this testing, it is now public information available on Eagle's website, that we are a site of this, here's exactly what's here. It is then very easy for regulators to say, you've got to fix that. And there's a balancing act that airports and Eagle are kind of constantly balancing of, the regulators are pushing very hard to be 5 more steps ahead, and the airports are saying, wait, we're still under obligation to use the product that's causing the problem, first off, and that's not anything within our control, that's a federal issue. And, you know, all of these things, so, you know, I really wanted to have that conversation before I went down the path of pursuing basically making more information public as to, you know, what we have. And, you know, really the soil testing is the new thing. So, you know, everything right now has been focused on groundwater and kind of where it is going to. But when you're testing the soil, that's really all about, you're testing the soil in preparations for probably digging it up and moving it away.
Yeah.
And
Well, we've been coming out okay so far, though, haven't we?
we are probably of airports, the lowest.
Yeah, that's what I'd understood.
Quantity of things. So, again, is cost benefit analysis of, but regulators have different criteria that they're looking at things for than we are. We have to often put the bill.
But if we had a fire right now, that would be spraying that stuff around.
Yep.
And that would that start this whole process over again? Yeah.
It would certainly lead to a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
About how to handle that, given everything
Okay.
that's known. And then the last thing is, this is the time of the year when we annually update our Airport Capital Improvement Plan, ACIP. Our long-term plan with the FAA, that we, our consultant and the state, basically work together on. The state's approaching it from a funding standpoint, where will grant dollars align to accomplish projects, especially if the projects require more funding than we are allocated with our typical grant funding, which, like our major taxiway project, certainly out well beyond our annual funding.
Mhm.
So that they're aligned with their resources, so that, this is the year that Manistee gets this chunk of funding and not some other airport. So I had a meeting with our consultant at the conference, and we kind of have sent me a draft over the weekend on this, and scheduling a meeting with the state next to update that. And then my last two slides, I don't think, well, the next one, I've already mentioned all of that, really talking about Cape Air's performance and how, the cancellation rate has significantly improved. But then the last one, just a little bit more looking ahead. So September, we're running between 25 and 30% ahead of last year, which is actually very good. And advanced bookings for October through December are up between 20 and 50% for those months. Obviously, the farther you get out, the numbers are smaller, so it doesn't take much to provide a big delta. But everything seems to be going very well, both from passengers currently boarding and complaining, as well as booking going forward. So, knock on wood, I hope our rough spot was behind us. I actually had my monthly call with Cape Air this morning, and there's nothing on the horizon that they're warning us about, saying get prepared for this issue, or because in general things get easier in the fall because just there's less travel demand, so there's more availability of pilots. As we know, we go from 4 flights a day to 2 flights a day in the off season, so that starts freeing up things that at least should allow us to continue through winter. How next spring goes when the opposite happens and everything needs to ramp up for summer. One thing I did get confirmation on is the planned removal of the 402s out of the Midwest is progressing. We haven't actually seen one here in a few weeks. And I wasn't sure if it was because we're doing the Techno maintenance here that there was just less opportunity for 402s to cycle through. But in general, while there still are some in the Midwest, they are, on their way out, and it's not anomaly that we aren't seeing them. So, pretty much we should expect an all-Tecnam fleet, going forward, and that's what we. So from a passenger comfort and standpoint, I think that's a good thing, as long as we've got reliability with Tecnam. Has been an issue in the past, is hopefully will be less of an issue because we've got maintenance more focused here.
We had a huge display at Oshkosh this year. Massive, the Tecnam display at Oshkosh.
Oh, really?
It was just huge.
That is my report.
Motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? I'm sorry, any discussion first? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. All right, old business. Since Jeff's not here, do we still want to dive into that?
I leave it to the board as to, again, my goal last month was to make sure that the information is out there.
Right.
I'm looking for direction, on a political issue, and I know Jeff stated his opinion last month that I'm the squeaky wheel and therefore it's not important, but, I'm looking for direction from the board as to how I should proceed, but until then, I will keep waiting.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Does anyone have anything they want to?
I do. I can't stop thinking about the fact that was the comment made.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we should care. I think we should. So I had a couple of questions then in the meantime that number one, we can do it even offline, but last week or whatever, last month, like there was I think like more like an aviation map picture of where like our airport zone is. Like, I can't understand that. So can we sit down for a minute and like on a normal map, can I have you draw at least roughly where we think or know it is?
Yep.
So I printed out two right before I came from Google Maps. There's probably a better version, but maybe even we could take 2 minutes or I can give these to you and you can mark them up and send them back or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you update me just quickly? I wasn't at last meeting, but the comment was that we just don't worry about it? Is that what you said?
I'm paraphrasing there a little bit,
It was that Barry's the only one that cares about it and he wants to know what's up, right?
Yeah.
Like.
That's what I heard, so yes.
Well, no, I think it was.
Obviously, we all.
You are the only one you seem to be the only one that cares, or something like that, right?
Well,
And I mean, I understand, because there's certain, and again, this is a topic that will ruffle feathers, both politically, regionally, et cetera, because the goal is to protect the interests of the airport, which means limiting things around the airport to certain degrees. And that will conflict with neighboring jurisdictions' goals, because that's not necessarily in alignment with their goals. So I understand where that is coming from.
we're a functioning airport. You know, so we have to probably be rough. I mean, we are in their township. And if they have to be partners with us, we're a functioning airport. So if there are restrictions or things that have to be done, whether they like it or not, we're here. I just don't, I guess I feel that it is our job to assure that the airport functions and is able to, and if that means we have to ruffle feathers, we have to ruffle.
But I mean, it comes at the cost of potentially impacting economic development in the region, and that's something we're struggling to increase.
So what would be so how would this impact economic development?
Well, let's just take, for example, if the township had followed state statutes throughout this last 20 years, the
Maple Ridge.
Maple Ridge would not be there, because that type of housing, is incompatible with, being in the vicinity of an airport. Low density, fine, but not something that's a high-density facility like that.
Casino effective?
No.
Okay.
Not by anything that we're doing, because that's not our major runway. It's our east-west runway. That's our major runway, and where things are problematic.
Well, I think we have to move forward because there's already some discussions about additional.
Yes. And when that was originally in planning, I guess, they had a public meeting, and I voiced that at that meeting. And again, the township was not very receptive to hearing that there are potentially things that limit, growth, because they haven't had growth for so long that they're looking for this. And other aspects aside, those are prime areas for that type of, growth. So, because it's, in that hospital corridor and,
Yeah, but they have a lot of other ability, but fortunately, I wish you weren't in this township. I say that all the time, so whether or not people get upset or not, it's like then.
How far out does the area extend?
And this gets into, the maps. I mean, there are varying degrees of impact, the farther you go out. There are impacts that go out 10 miles, but when you're out that far, you're talking the heights of structures that just don't exist in, rural Michigan. But if you were in a large metropolitan area, that might be something that would come into play. But as you get closer in, but it is roughly kind of, off that end.
Right.
It is roughly that area, about up to, what is the road that, Filer Credit Union's on?
Oh, yeah.
It's about
The
that.
Cabot Bay Highway, that, isn't that a couple, where?
Well,
No,
I mean,
it's a tiny road.
Oh,
Across from
Right
the,
across the hospital.
yes, I mean, it's kind of out to
Oh, I
about
see right here.
that area is
Well, and
most of the impact is from a zoning and limiting certain types of uses.
but at a township level, you would hope that this would never occur, but hope to God a plane does not crash into, I mean, that's why they say, don't put anything there, the potential.
I mean, there's that, but then there's also
Noise.
noise and other nuisance type complaints
I
that
know when the.
after airports, after housing existed, then it's the airport's fault, even though the airport predated. But airports grow, we get different types of aircraft, they may get louder. So, I mean, the impacts can change over time. And again, those are part of those,
I can
protections
definitely tell when
along
Cape Air is going over, they are
and you're farther away
much
than.
farther away. But they like to come up that coast there.
Yep.
That would be my thing. We, when we were just a small airport and just kind of going along and everything was fine, okay, that's great. But we are growing, we have been growing, so why not be planning? Why not be attentive? Why not be following the regulations? And we can't tell them to pick up and move, but that township certainly has a responsibility not to put anybody else there. And there are some big development ideas going on across the street there, so. To me, it makes no sense.
That direction's okay, though?
There's less likelihood of things going on in that direction because it's agricultural right now. So from a zoning perspective, it actually mirrors, you know, the types of zoning you'd like. So it could be a problem if, you know, someone requested a zoning change to make that industrial or something like that. But that's probably not likely given, you know, where it is and the constraints of the river and access, things like that.
Maybe the I mean, I'm speaking now, I'm thinking liability wise, it's like, you know, send a message letter, the authority to the township saying, you know, please be aware. Sorry, violations.
And, you know, so, you know, that gets into, you know, the detail of the township did not follow state statute as they went through their 2008 zoning update. So the question is, do we go back to them and say, you need to fix this? You can't obviously change things retroactively because, but fix it. Or do we basically work with them and say, you know, for your next zoning update, whenever that will be, but probably within the next few years, at that time, we're gonna ask that you fix it. You know, it's a difference in approach, but it gives us different, you know, risk factors because a lot can happen between now and when that next zoning update could happen.
It puts them on notice that we're making these requests. We know that they need to make these changes. And then we will always be liable. Anybody can sue you for any reason, but at least we would have a paper trail back to the township saying, we told you.
Does the township have the same law firm as the city?
I don't know about this township.
Yes, and
So it's the same as the airport?
Mhm.
so Sailor represents
And
us,
And the
and
township?
Manistee Township is his partner,
Wilson?
Wilson. So, I mean, it's the same firm, different individuals, so in some ways, that's convenient, because they can talk about it amongst themselves,
Wilson, no, yeah, well,
but,
I go with that. This is just, I just don't think I just don't feel, in my opinion, nothing. Have to address in some way, shape, or form. And we're not gonna be able to make them change. No, you know, we strongly recommend this. In my opinion, and we can wait till everybody comes back. This is just township. I just hear about it all the time. I don't have a problem sending it.
I think you're right that we have to.
I think we do.
Yeah.
I think we have to have some sort of process that shows we were trying.
Mhm. Beyond just having you go to meetings and, yeah, it should come from the authority board. Would it be possible, Barry, and I didn't think I read it in the content that you provided the last couple meetings, but to get, even if it's like a layman summary of if the right zoning protections were in place, like this is what they mean, or this is how they used to read or should read, so we can understand, okay, so when we talk about this tiny area, this...
Put down on paper some of the things I've verbally explained with that as kind of backup documentation, but I haven't, like, written it down into.
Yeah, and maybe you don't even have to, right? The state's probably gotta have, like, this, if...
Yeah, but some of the specifics
That's
are
right.
specific to our
Okay.
circumstances, so.
Yeah, I'd like to see that
So if we can
anyway.
even do that at the next board meeting with those, put them into the
Have those.
record.
Yep.
And then, make a decision at that time. The other thing I wanna ask about, is, I'm not sure if they have their own zoning here in this township, or if they're contracted.
They have their own zoning.
They do.
Karen Klaus, I think it is, took
Oh,
over
yeah,
from
yeah,
Guy
yeah,
Fennell,
that's
I
right.
think it is.
We tried to open a business out here. Nobody would call you back. Hooked to the sewer line.
I guess my question, Barry, is if the board's gonna move forward with a letter, which I think sounds like the right thing to do as a fiduciary, but my expectation would be is that a lawyer would help you draft that letter.
Right.
But if it's the same law firm, are they even gonna be capable of doing that?
I would say yes until proven otherwise.
Okay.
Bigger issue, I think, there is just getting their time, because they're generally projects, so. But
Was that an ad hoc committee to sit down with Sailor?
I think, I mean, what I'm hearing right now is they've given direction to basically take a lot of this information, getting it into a document for next meeting. I think that's the next step.
Right, but I'm thinking.
Probably have this conversation when the full board is here next month. And then I think that would be the time to ask that question.
Right, and I was thinking out beyond this initial step. We'll be done.
So to be clear, as part of what you compile for next month will be a summary of, like, these would be the relevant impacts for
Yep.
this type of area, okay.
And that would be a lot easier to see on something like that than what we got last.
Yeah, I mean, I tried so hard, and I'm like, I don't even know, I don't know where any of these lines are. Cool.
All right, anything else?
Only thing I would suggest, because we're going through this at the casino right now, Google Earth is very out of date. So if you have the ability to just shoot a drone up there and get more current pictures, because that's what we just had to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to work with an architect on getting some things fixed on the roof, and I'm looking at Google Earth, I'm like, that's not there, no, that's not right.
Well, the county just got some new aerials.
So if there's something newer that's more applicable to what's actually out
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
And have access to those, certainly.
Sure, so,
Possibly.
well, your, Manistee County is actually the only county that supplies the aerials countywide. So you can go on the county website, it's the LEA program, you can go in and choose your parcel, and then you can go and upload, and then it shows all your parcel lines. The last time that I had sent data was before I left, so, I mean, the information should be pretty compared to.
Yeah, print that, yeah, you can download that.
And county planning did work, they were contracted by the township to do their master plan
That's what I was wondering.
update. So they actually have the aviation things as part of their GIS. So going to them will get off things myself by hand.
I can't imagine that planning group hasn't viewed all this stuff, and all these red flags are important. Knowing that group.
I know it was a hot topic of the previous head of that department before he left.
Okay, anything else? All right, LEO coverage, anything we need to?
I do not have an update
Okay,
on that.
okay.
No.
Any, new business?
What's the holdup on the LEO coverage?
It's become a low priority item because TSA said, from their perspective, it's a non-issue. So therefore, it's just my lack of time in the summer to get.
New business?
Something I wondered about, I can't remember if we talked about it last time or not, but with our maintenance costs being what they are this year, and I think we increased that line item on the budget next year just a little bit. This might be difficult, but would it be prudent to ask you to put together, or have somebody put together a list of, like, these are our assets that we anticipate may require maintenance, and, like, even if it's a thumb in the air, here's some person's take on the current state of those assets, So if nothing else, we have something we can look at and sort of socialize to say, hey, we're not gonna be surprised when we need to go spend an extra 20K on something that feels like it's out of the middle of nowhere.
But can't we do that, a 5-year plan?
Well, so I forget what the name of the committee is, the
That's how we got to.
Capital Projects Committee.
Right.
So we've got a kind of a 5-year look at assets, and that's kind of what that's intended for. It's not to the level of detail that you're asking, but I think that committee could work to, you know, flush out what makes sense to take that information to the next level.
But there's not an actual depreciation schedule on any of the capital.
Exactly, that's kind of
I think
more of
that's
a-
what you're asking
Yeah.
for, and that's like something we would have.
What's your,
But if I'm, like, it's not just depreciation, I think it's also what are you spending on it? It's like,
Right.
where I work, each piece of equipment, they're tracking how much we're spending to maintain it, to figure out, okay, when we do our capital budget for the next year, is this costing us more to maintain versus replace?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what you're asking.
That's right.
And we've kind of gotten ourselves in, there's one piece of equipment that has really kind of driven this whole discussion, is that pickup truck.
I mean, that was a significant piece, but it's.
The fire truck,
Into-
plow, is
yeah,
there a
that's
lawnmower,
true.
yeah.
But what makes us unique is we don't control the replacement timeline of equipment. That is part of our federal funding, because,
for some of it?
well, for the large ticket items, that is the case. So, you know, you look at plows, a fire truck, aspects of this building, all of those things are federally funded. And so let's take, for example, so we've got 2 plow trucks. One is a 2006, now coming up on 20 years old, and the other is a 99, so that's currently 23 years old. I've had on our FAA capital plans that we need to start planning for that. Swap out the old one, get a new one, and then the current new one becomes the old one. For probably 7-8 years, and it's still not even approaching, you know, level of funding. What often happens is, until it becomes a critical need, meaning we can't operate unless this gets done next year, it just keeps getting pushed down on the priority list because, oh, you can go another year. So it kind of defeats the purpose of planning, because you plan and then you say to the FAA, this is what we think we need, and they say, well, you know, this other airport has these higher things, so those dollars are gonna go somewhere else, and you're gonna have to get by another 5 years with that. But there are certainly things within our control that we can do a better job.
Oh, remember, we have another round of the CARES money here. And as we, you know, we got, what, 200 and some thousand, or
Right. Yep.
some of the stuff, start looking,
Yep.
you know, what we put forth, because I'll continue to be, pushing that any asset of county.
And another example I'll give, and this ties into a conversation I had last week with our consultant, is in looking at the grant funding that is now available for airport terminals, trying to figure out how we can get into assuming that we get approved and that we, you know, can get a terminal project done, how can we roll into that as much of the, I don't want to say maintenance items, but repairing things that are wearing out, like HVAC, security system, you know, windows for energy efficiency. I mean, there are all sorts of things that, if there are other funding streams, that can pay for it, and it doesn't have to come out of our local pockets, that's good. The problem, and I see this all the time with the city, is they wait well past when something is due, because that's when the funding aligns, and, you know, well, we don't want to spend on this because 3 years from now, we're gonna do this, and then we wouldn't have to spend on it, so we'll wait another 3 years. But that's when it starts getting expensive, because then you're Band-Aiding things together.
Well, you know it, there's a truck falling through the Riverwalk, you know?
And that actually happened technically on my property. I don't think of it that way, but that Riverwalk is technically behind my building,
Well,
and
there
it
you
was on
go.
my property.
Yeah.
Nice. Any other new business?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna come back to how I started this, which is,
Yeah.
I think it would be prudent for the board to have visibility into, not at the 5-year plan level, like, that's a dream. I view that as a dream. I want something that's based in reality, that we have visibility into. So if nothing else, I'm not sitting here this time next year saying, oh, shoot, we 2X. So I'm asking myself, I wonder what else could happen. I wonder what is most likely to happen. I just think that makes sense. I guess it's something I'd like to ask, but regardless of funding, it's agnostic to funding sources, 5-year plans, everything else.
My plan, based on your input, is take our existing committee and work through how we want to better address what you're looking for.
You're looking for a maintenance, not a maintenance budget, but the actual plan. What are we doing and when?
So that's probably the best, but then to start, like, at the most rudimentary level, what even might go on a maintenance plan? Like, what assets are there, and what is the current condition of those assets?
And the key thing is what Andrew said, is tracking what we're spending things on by asset to understand, you know, where things are.
So that would be the Capital Projects Committee would start working on that then?
Yep.
Okay.
And, you know, not that you're chair, but
No.
as vice chair, we do need that committee to start meeting fairly regularly, because we now have the grants from the county, so we need to start making the plans on how we're gonna spend them.
Yeah, that's a 1 year, you have to expense that.
Right.
I think we said 1 year.
And given lead
Set your
times
own
on
requirement?
things,
Yeah.
that,
Set your own requirements? I thought with ARPA funds, you just had to have it committed to.
We put it on there.
Good luck with that.
I know, well, that's what he's starting to do. But, if there's a actual effort to expend those, and you have a delay because you don't have the supplies and stuff like that, that'll definitely be okay.
Biggest hurdle is gonna be getting contractors. We've got 3 projects right now, and we reached out to 3 different contractors. One said he's booked for 2 years, and the other 2 are booked for a year.
Yeah.
Okay. You just added a couple of meetings to my schedule. All right. I think that kind of covered comments, but any other comments by the members? I do believe we stand adjourned with 9 minutes to spare.
Next meeting's the 17th.
Yep.